Science has infamously kept up barriers to perpetuate classism, racism, and sexism. So why is it that in the year of 2021, we still have these barriers passed around education level and financial status around science and access to it? For a number of years now, there's been a push for there to be open access to all scientific research and science articles and journals, so that rather than this information being kept behind a paywall, it would be easy and free to access for everyone. Before 2013, it wasn't required for any federally funded research to be open access or free to access. It was only in 2013 that research done by such places as the CDC and the FDA had to be open access, which is definitely a big concern because open access is very important to keep integrity and to keep these agencies accountable, especially when they're dealing with such things as health and safety. People having open access to the information allows them to make informed decisions about what products they're buying or what medical treatments they're using. While this move in 2013 was definitely good progress for the open access movement, it isn't perfect. This doesn't even apply to all federally funded research. It only applies to those getting more than $100 million of federally funded research. And so there's a lot of stuff that is still being left behind paywalls. And that's bad, as my picture seems to agree. There are so many benefits to having things be open access. You never know who is going to be behind the next scientific breakthrough. I mean, we've all heard about those stories of parents who just pick up a textbook and start researching in order to find cures for illnesses for their kids. It could be anyone, not necessarily people with scientific degrees who otherwise would be the only ones able to get some of this information. And part of the push has not only been for the scientific articles to start being released open access, but also the technology that is being used in science. So not necessarily access to every single telescope, but computer programs to be open for anyone to use and download. Not only this, but open access also allows people to make informed opinions about other issues. For example, my videos are very reliant on research. I take the research that I do and relate it to another subject. I rely on this being open access because I'm a broke high school student, and I also rely on this being updated information. Sometimes journals will only have things go open access after a year, and while this is progress, during that year, people aren't having updated information. If all that's open access is something that's outdated and now considered incorrect, it doesn't matter for me because I can't see the correct information. I'm going to go off of what it is that I do have access to. And that can lead to misinformation. Say I did in one of my videos. Now my opinion is informed off of now outdated research, and I've also now informed other people based off of outdated research. Even though new research is out there, it's just not accessible to me. There's so many benefits to having things be open access, so what's stopping people? Is it greed? No! For once, it's not greed. Now this process was a little bit confusing for me to understand at first, because of my first thought. My first thought was that, okay, you just need this stuff to be published, to be put out there, you just need a platform for it to live. Easy. You just have a website, you have some servers somewhere. If Wikipedia can do it, you can do it too. But that's not actually what goes into the publishing process. There's a lot more to it. The publishing process also includes the editing of the articles and peer reviewing the articles, which is vital for keeping the integrity and accuracy in science, and we can't do away with this system. So you definitely... This one wants to go too. I really tried something, I'm sorry. These are both things that are very important, and you can't do away with them, but someone has to do it, and that person has to get paid. Already the people who are doing this work are underpaid. If you add on to that, not getting revenue from people paying to access these articles, how are you going to pay these people? This money can't be made up by the scientists who are giving their information or trying to publish their works, because oftentimes grants will limit how much funding can go towards publishing costs. But this money has to come from somewhere, and if it's not the publishing people, if it's not the scientists, then where is that going to be? Even though many scientists want to publish open access, there's many barriers in doing so. But open access is a very important issue, so what can be done in order to try to reach it? Well, some organizations are already adding more money in order to have stuff they're funding be open access. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced that any research they funded would be published only in open access journals. For science that is being federally funded, the government could allot more money in order to cover these publishing costs. However, my fear is that if more money is having to go into each thing being funded, that would mean less things being funded overall, rather than more money being allotted to research and to science, or otherwise increasing taxes, because government doesn't seem to like doing that. And similarly with private research, again, I would fear that the same thing would happen, that they would fund less projects in order to give more money to each project. And not to mention, in these privately funded science, the peer review process is even more important because you don't want businesses getting away with things because they backed it up with their own science with no one else actually confirming that. That is a dangerous game to play. Well, what have other industries done in order to make up money during publishing? Well, let's look at journalism. Nowadays, news agencies get their money either from subscriptions or from ads. Obviously, subscriptions are out of question because that is literally what we are trying to prevent from doing. So, ads. You just put a few ads on there, they're a little bit annoying, but it gets the job done. And we're all good. No. Most experts agree that the reliance in clicks nowadays in journalism has led to many important issues not being covered. Journalists now have to worry about what will get clicks, what will resonate, what will keep people coming back, versus what's actually important to cover. Many fear what this means for the future of journalism and for the integrity of journalism, but that's a topic we'll cover in the future. The main pull away is that we can't make the same mistake with science. We need to ensure that integrity is still there. We don't want conflicts of interest because people are getting deals with businesses to put ads on their website and then they're more inclined to have science that goes in favor of them. There's just so many things that could go wrong with this. In order to make a move towards open access, there would need to be a fundamental change in science, in how science is funded, and there's also many more barriers too. So a measure to kind of see how good of a scientist someone is or how topical their research is how often they are cited within the first year of publishing. Oftentimes, people who publish in open access journals, those works get cited significantly less than those that are published in non-open access journals. This can be very detrimental for someone who's trying to reach tenure, who's trying to reach some kind of achievement, who's trying to prove themselves as something in order to get more funding, because the numbers will say that their research isn't actually being used. Especially as many of the scientists that are for the open access movement tend to skew younger, they're more in need of any help they can get in trying to get ahead in things. They can't afford to lose that number in order to just publish open access. They have to look after themselves. And it creates a very interesting problem. Another barrier would be having to make scientific journals easier to read for the layperson. As I'm sure anyone who's participated in science fair can attest, scientific articles are notoriously very hard to read. They're an absolute slug to get through sometimes. So a push for true equal access to this information would in theory include making it easier for anyone to understand. And in theory, that is a really good idea. You don't need any prerequisites in order to learn about science, in order to get into any field and just learn about it or interact with it. But then that would mean that somebody needs to take the extra time to translate it or to rewrite it. You probably need 2 versions of the article to be published because actual scientists still need all of that jargon in order to understand, in order to use that effectively, but then you also need that version that we can understand a lot easier. Who's going to do that? Is it going to be the same people who do peer reviewing and editing during the publishing process? Then that means you need to pay them more. Is it going to be the scientists themselves? Do they have time for that? How are you going to pay for extra hours for that? And again, this would skew to hurting newer, younger scientists. So already with the distribution of science technology, we see this issue. So in order to actually effectively publish a scientific technology, scientific code, whatever thing, you also need a guide as to how to use it. You can't just publish the thing and then people aren't going to know what to actually do with it or what numbers to put where or whatever thing of how to use it. So you also need to include a guide, but that takes time. That takes energy. That takes stuff that, well, if you're tenured and you have a safe spot, yes, you can afford to take that time. And you already are secured and you don't really have to worry about how much you're working or if you can take on extra stuff. But those that are younger, those that aren't in a secure position, they can't afford to take that time to write those guides, to retranslate their own works, because they're so busy trying to also be in school or needing to take on as many projects as they can because they're early in their careers. So again, it would be very hard and negatively affect newer scientists, which isn't fair, and those are the voices that oftentimes we need most in there because they bring in those new ideas. It's definitely frustrating that open access isn't that easy to achieve, that there's not some magical answer that I can give you guys as to how to push for this. But it definitely also isn't in the forefront of many discussions, and maybe that's the first step, is talking about it again. But there are people in journals that are working towards this mission of open access. I'm going to include the statement about open access, and they also have some tabs about how they do their peer review process. It's PLOS. They're the one that I mainly saw when I was researching open access stuff, but there are quite a few open access science journals, and I implore you to, I don't know really how you would support them. I guess just check them out. And if in the future there's some stuff about open access, now you're a little bit more informed about it. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful time. Thank you. Or bye-bye? I don't know.